Good morning, Campbell McCreary, Amvest Capital, New York City. Welcome to the Amvest Capital Inc. live webinar with Signature Resources Limited. Signature trades on the venture as SGU, Sierra Golf Utah, and it's SGGTF, Sierra Golf Tango Foxtrot on the OTCQB. Hope you will enjoy today's program. It'll be available in about an hour after we wrap up at amvestcapital.com/webinars. Feel free to chat in your questions in the question pane of GoToWebinar. We love asking audience questions. And then, of course, at the end of the event, please share your feedback on your way out or to the email. Really, really appreciate it. And it makes its way to management very quickly. Amvest, of course, is a New York-based specialist investment management and corporate finance firm focused solely on the natural resource sector. Very important, this call is for informational purposes only and is no way a solicitation to buy or sell securities. Please read this carefully. Very pleased to have with us today Robert Wallace, the president and CEO of Signature. He's an engineer by background, and he was most recently senior vice president of corporate development with Golden Star Resources, and before that, business development at Yamana, and worked on quite a few prominent transactions, including the $3.9 billion joint acquisition of Cisco and the $395 million acquisition of Extore Gold Mines for Cerro Moro, now Yamana. So two very high-profile names. And then prior to Yamana, he was merely at Barrick for 15 years and worked on the successful acquisition of Placer Dome. So with that, Robert, if you want to turn on your webcam, let's dive in, and I'll see you on the other side.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you. Definitely pleasure to be here and glad you're able to attend. Yes, 25 years in this industry. I've seen a lot, done a lot. 15 years with Barrick, just under 9 with Yamana, and 1 with Golden Star. 15 years of that corporate development, combing the planet, looking for opportunities like we have with Signature. Checks every box in terms of rarity, district level potential, multi-million ounce high grade resource already discovered. It's an exciting opportunity and time right now for Signature as it's just embarked on its growth. So moving forward in this presentation, I'll draw your attention to the forward-looking statements. Of course, familiar with those. I'll give you a very brief overview. This is historically discovered back in the late 40s, not dissimilar to Kirkland Lake, Timmins, those discoveries. But this firm that discovered it drilled over 28,000 meters, put a shaft, 3 sublevels in, were mobbing mill equipment to start production. They ran out of funding in the late 40s, and consequently, claims were fragmented, moved into receivership, moved into private ownership. It stayed in the shadows then in stasis for nearly 40 years until late 70s, 80s, when smaller exploration firms tried to kick at that can. They themselves ran out of funds at that time as well. One firm did manage to release a historical resource, of which defined a 234,000 ounce deposit grading just under 7 grams per ton. It wasn't until 2013 when we consolidated these claims, moved them into the Signature vehicle. That was before my time. I joined in late November last year. And since my joining in late November, we've expanded that land claim now to nearly 300 square kilometers. That's taking 90% of the existing greenstone belt that this discovery resides in. We're very excited about that. We are about 85% through our 2,600 meter drill campaign. We're expecting gold assays imminently, actually preliminary results today, but the final certificates in about a week's time. So stay tuned. We'll be releasing that shortly, and we're looking forward to that. Our long range plan, of course, is to continue what we're doing expand our efforts, upscale our drilling, increase the rate of which we're adding ounces and growing the Lingman Lake resource, ultimately targeting, say, over the next 18 to 24 months, a multi-million ounce high-grade resource at Lingman Lake, as well as opening up our regional territory to demonstrate through further discovery significant district level potential. That's the high level picture. We are located in the northwestern quadrant of Ontario, elephant country, if you will, near the Manitoba border, about 50 kilometers from that. More specifically, as I said, this is a tier 1 world-class address we reside in. That in itself is where to hold 90% of an entire greenstone belt in the Abitibi region. You see here, of course, Timmins Kirkland Lake, 200 million plus ounces mined to date. Red Lake mining camp to our south, over 70 odd million ounces pulled. Nearest neighbors, Monument Bay project on the Manitoba side, about 80, 100 kilometers north of us. Nearest producing neighbor southeast, the Musselwhite mine. Again, just fantastic territory we're in, and this is no exception in terms of discovery potential. We are surrounded by infrastructure denoted by the yellow lines. We have permanent roads, permanent power all the way into the Red Sucker First Nation nearest neighbor community on the Manitoba side. And on the east side in Ontario, we have the Ontario government working with the First Nations group in this quadrant of Ontario to move the high tension, high voltage power north up into and inclusive of our nearest neighbor, Sachiko Lake First Nations, which is about 40 kilometers due east of us. So ultimately, you see that we'll have permanent roads and power on both sides of us, likely within the next 2 to 3 years, which bodes well in terms of timing for completing the delineation of the two items I spoke of, our high-grade resource at Lingman Lake deposit, but also the regional potential as well. About 2 years or so, moving that into early stage engineering and study work. Having these infrastructure items in place is and will be quite supportive of moving the project forward rapidly. You can also see there's 3 modern airports that surround us. Under normal non-COVID conditions, you would see daily flights south into the cities from there, but right now things are at a reduced capacity, of course, but we do have helo and fixed wing support at all 3. Looking at our claims package, zooming in even more, it is massive. As I said, 300 square kilometers, nearly 32 kilometers east-west strike. These 2 purple patented claims you see amongst our Crown Land claims, the smallest is where the discovery is, where we are drilling. That's what I refer to as the known. It's getting 80% of our attention and funding, and the other 20% is towards unlocking this vast region. To our immediate right as well, there's a Poshy stamp claims box there that we weren't successful in obtaining, but that resides with a Canadian, just recently, an exploration firm that is intending to move some of their efforts forward there. So it's good to see that is at least advancing. Nevertheless, you can see the vastness of our claim package, and most of our efforts actually is towards the south and west in terms of what we're doing to unlock potential. Looking more closely now, that small patented claim box, this is where the discovery, where the drilling is. Just barely a kilometer south of us is the Lingman Lake itself. That's our main transport access directly to site year-round. The grayness you see throughout here is a bedrock outcropping, so quite favorable conditions for expanding exploration rapidly. It is a boreal forest situation, so it's really quite benign in terms of moving drills around and working with it. It's not any more difficult than that. So excellent conditions. Looking closer, we are looking now at where the historic resource is, to 234,000 ounces, right at surface, down to only 180 meters deep. It's just incredible in terms of the richness there right at surface. You can see that on the west side of this diabase dike feature, this post-mineralization feature, we are drilling as we speak to expand this known resource to the west as a first pass, sort of low-hanging fruit opportunity. This is outcropping at surface. You can see there's been some historic discovery indicating that it's continuing to the west. We are, of course, focused on that now to extend this out and work towards doubling the strike length along surface, mind you. I refer to this as an iceberg with our team, that we found the tip of the iceberg. It's a mesothermal deposit. We know they run kilometers deep and on strike. We're just looking to find the extents, the shoulders of this thing right out of the gate. So we're excited about doing that before we expand our drilling to go further to depth as well as on strike. Looking underground, this really summarizes the historic activity to date. You're looking southwest, this arrow denoting north. You can see the historic 234,000 ounce resources literally from surface down to only 180 meters, pin cushioned with over 28,000 meters of drilling, substantive knowledge from that, multiple duty from each drill hole. You can see as well, these mineralized zones are extremely robust, anywhere from 2 to 20 meters thick, each of them. And the drilling, of course, that's taking place historically, but also that's taking place on the west currently. We're getting multiple duty from each drill hole, passing through multiple zones, giving us a lot of data in a short amount of time. So we're moving through this quite rapidly. You can see the historic workings that continue to exist there. These historic workings are decommissioned, they're flooded, but certainly given the hard rock, pristine sort of environment they're in, likely next stage work as you move towards early stage study work, engineering, probably dewater this, recondition, get back in, and continue underground. That represents, of course, in today's dollars, many millions of development. So we're glad to have that. But interestingly, the historic workings that are here also presented to us when we dug deeper, knowledge about the richness of this deposit that really got my attention, and that of many of the independent geologists that reviewed this on the early days of my joining. For example, 4 500-pound bulk samples were taken from these workings historically. They graded 19 grams per ton on average. This vertical raise you see here denoted in colored in red, it is about 100 feet in height, or 30 meters by 3 feet or a meter in diameter. That graded consistently along its 100 feet, 28 grams per ton. So, you can see we're beginning to gather data that's telling us that this system is far more robust than that 1980s historic resource is telling us. Nevertheless, as we move forward, look at some of the geology here, north being on the right-hand side, south on the left. It just shows the yellow features. That's where the gold zones are, how consistent they are. It's a mesothermal deposit. We know these things run to depth. Scale is a big part of this story. We also know it's closely associated with this pink quartz feldspar porphyry package you see here denoted in peach color. We're finding more of that to the north, but it hasn't been drilled historically. So we're fully expecting that this thing is actually open to the north as well as obviously to depth and on strike. I spoke of scale. To talk about nearly 250,000 ounces, only 180 meters depth from surface is literally the tip of an iceberg. Knowing that mesothermal orogenic deposits, if you will, as we know, run kilometers deep, kilometers strike. You can see here surrounding us the mesothermal deposits of pure gold, Red Lake, Phoenix, Musselwhite, arguably Hemlo, much farther south, mind you, but they all have their resources defined to kilometers depth and strike. So combine that with just looking at it from an ounce per vertical meter perspective, how dense and rich this is. We're already about 1,300 ounces per vertical meter with our historic resource. If we double that strike, which we're working on as we speak, that doubles our ounces, and we're looking at moving into rarefied territory quite quickly before we're even really getting warmed up. moving to depth and so forth. So again, scale is a massive part of the story here. We're very excited about that. In 2018, when our founders had consolidated his land package, they started in 2018 to validate the historic resource. They drilled 22 twin holes as well as reassayed a bunch of that historic core. All of those results came back correlating over 94%, which checks a big box. But also interestingly, many of those twin holes that were drilled graded better than the holes they twinned, which is quite surprising and checks another box in terms of this deposit screaming at us in terms of its robustness. You combine that, of course, with the data sets I already spoke of, the bulk samples, the vertical rays. There was a deeper hole drilled down to 240 meters just beneath the shaft and beneath the historic resource. It intersected 325 grams per ton over 1.5 meters. So again, this deposit is screaming at us to add more resources and move it to depth, move it to strike and grow it. And that's exactly what we're focused on for the balance of this year. So looking forward, again, this is an image just indicating where those twin holes were done, mostly around the core of the historic resource, but also some to the west that graded well as well. You can see here just an indication of how robust the high grade nature is. It's literally across the entire known mineralization. That is key here and checks a massive box for us. The high grade isn't localized in any one zone or area. It's pervasive across the entire known mineralization. That deep hole that I mentioned, drilled beneath the shaft, there it is, grading 325 grams. You can see that beneath the historic resource here on the east, it's wide open. Looking forward to that. Just some of the intercepts that were done in 2018. This core sample, for example, not getting into any technical details, just indicating visually that the nature of the mineralization across all of what we're drilling and have historically looks like this. We're not chasing discrete white quartz, narrow veins down rabbit holes. This is a very wide, pervasive, evenly graded deposit that we're noticing. And you can see here just from this 10-meter intercept sample graded nearly 12 grams, how pervasive the high grade is consistently across that 10 meters. That is exactly what you want to see. If I put my engineering hat on, you're looking for low probability of mining dilution. You're looking at consistent wide zones that are amenable to mechanized mining, low operating costs, these sorts of things. It checks all of those boxes. So exciting to note that. Coming back to surface to reorient you, historic resource on the east here, we are pushing and expanding it to the west, and more specifically in 3D. This is really what's telling the story of what we're doing right now. The historic resource shown here on the right-hand side, which is the east. We are drilling as we speak. We're 85% done this, pushing this to the east. You can see there's already been some discovery historically, picking up these other zones. So you can see it's trending towards the northwest, which is actually pretty good. In checking another box in terms of the macro geology, the environment we're in, and estimating where this deposit is going. But nevertheless, that is what we're working on. This is what we'll have assay results imminently on within about a week's time. And then, of course, the week subsequent to that. So we're excited about getting that out. We're also running IP geophysics on this entire region, about 3.5 kilometers east-west, 2 kilometers north-south, and about 500 meters deep. So we're going to be lighting up what's underground essentially with these IP geophysics techniques that are amenable to higher sulfide type deposits. In this case, it's pyrite, which the gold is associated with, and certainly we would hope to see in these types of deposits. But by doing so, we hope to light that up and fingerprint on it what we've done and what we've discovered, but also have it tell us really where the optimal locations are to drill to grow this thing rapidly. So that data is going to be coming in about a month's time, ahead of our preparation to have 2 drills focused on drilling this throughout starting mid to late summer. 10,000 meter program pushing on both sides, moving to depth and strike on the east, moving to depth and strike on the west, dedicated to doing that. So with that geophysics, with the drilling data we're gathering, we're going to be well prepared to expand this very rapidly throughout the rest of the year. I'll just skip a couple of slides here. That's just showing the targets that we were drilling. Regionally speaking, if we zoom out now, the deposit we were just looking at is in this purple box. I said that it was trending towards the northwest, we're seeing on the western flank. Well, sure enough, you can see how the main contact of this entire greenstone belt, and that is the greenstone environment you see here is shaped like an amoeba, if you will. That main contact along the margin of this greenstone belt is what the geologists are most focused on. That is where you typically find the majority of the high scale, high potential, gold deposition, high quality gold deposition. And sure enough, right at the inflection point here, and it's where you expect to find those, are at the inflection points on that main contact, the Lingman Lake discovery. Here it is. So of course, we're excited about what else is here. We're going to be flying geophysics on this entire claims package, as well as LiDAR, starting in a couple of weeks. So we're building that data set out like layers of an onion to target drill potential here in terms of high potential targets. You can see we're not lacking that. In 2018, when they flew geophysics on the claims package as it was then, you can see the amount of growth we've added to the claims package to take in over 90% of the entire greenstone belt and its margins, that all important main contact, of course. You can see as well the existence of the main regional faulting structures. That too is important and acts as an additional corridor for those hydrothermal fluids and gold deposition to occur. Well, the geophysics is indicating that that is something we have in spades here. It's jumping off the page, as you can see. The geologists have already identified 7 high potential targets, most towards the west, of course. But you can see that, there's a lot of areas here that haven't been looked at that are high potential. For example, target number 2, historic surface sampling was done here. Those results were jumping off the page when our guys looked at it in 2018, 19, and 20. They did their own sampling and those results were confirmed. So we know that there's a lot of potential in these targets, but by reflying all of this geophysics, reestablishing what our high potential priorities are, that is our focus for the balance of this year, is to get that done, identified, send geology teams then out to the top 3 or 5 targets to surface sample, map, geochem, that sort of thing, in preparation for regional test drilling. So our potential to find more icebergs, if you will, and discovery in this is extremely high. It's what I mentioned at the start about the attractiveness for me to see something that has district level potential and scale. I spoke of Kirkland Lake Camp is 6 to 7 kilometers in length. You can put the entire Kirkland Lake Camp between targets 3 and 6 here. So it's indicating the amount of potential that Signature holds. To actually hold an entire camp is unheard of. To have this scale, of course, is beyond that with this pristine environment that we're in. And I say it's pristine because there's very little metamorphic deformation that's occurring, in this region. There is some minor faulting and so forth, but as we see with the Lingman Lake discovery, the pristine nature of it is working very much to our advantage, and it's again a rarity to have this. So moving forward, of course, we talk about generating value for Signature Resources for its shareholders. You can see our potential to develop a multi-million ounce resource at the Lingman Lake deposit. We're anticipating somewhere between 2 and 5 million ounces if the mineralization continues to be as consistent as it is, as we continue to drill it out, as well as the regional potential and discovery there. You can see around us, most projects are trading about $100 EV per ounce Canadian, and deals being done at multiples of that. So you can see pretty clearly that we're targeting a market capital and a growth for Signature that is substantive. There's no doubt, and certainly we've been working to do that, as you can see through the share performance. We've also focused on growing and building out a small but very capable, very deep and broad experienced team, anywhere from mine builders to world-class metallurgists and geologists. We have it. And that really brings us to where we are today, which is we are fully funded to take us deep into this year, continuing activities at the scale and pace we're doing now. But that is not our goal. Our goal, as I've mentioned, is to increase the scale of our drilling, increase our capabilities and our ability to start adding ounces faster. And of course, that translates to adding value to our share price and to the shareholders rapidly as well. The rarity related with this I spoke of, to be able to have a project that's not only discovered, but this drill ready to, take on as much drilling as we can fund and give it and grow the resource proportionally is rare, particularly in Canada, in this elephant country. So we are looking forward to that. Our share structure wasn't ideal when we inherited it, but we inherited a company that was 7 million market cap, 2 million in debt, and no cash. In just about 6 months, we've raised 4.5 million. We have no debt, and we're just under 3 million cash in the bank. That is covering the balance of our drilling, all the geophysics I spoke of, and further optimizing at our camp to prepare for the next stage drilling. So we are looking forward to market reaction from our favorable market reaction from our assays that are imminent, and from there, we look forward to building our capabilities and escalating our drill activities through the year. You can see our ownership is mostly retail at this stage. We're quite proud of it. There is a lot of very dedicated, enthusiastic investors, and we're continuing to grow that. And of course, you can see since my appointment in November and that of our chair, Paulo Lustrito, volumes picked up substantively as well. And just to leave you with one note, the warrants that you see here, all of those are expiring, or pretty much the majority, 98% of them, over the next year and a half. So half this year, half next, at 100% basis. Exercising that represents about 8 million in hard dollars over the next year and a half this year, half next. So, with a modest expectation of exercising with those, we'll see the share capital begin to come in line as well, and then, continue to move forward. So fund-wise, we're comfortable with where we are, although we're focused on growth and increasing that so that we can increase our drilling and the results to shareholders. That's essentially where we are. Good time for questions.
Yes, indeed. What will be the drill hole spacing at target 6? How many holes are you going to drill in the coming one?
Those regional targets, we don't have drill plans for those yet. Those are identified for geology teams to go out and start surface mapping and sampling. From that, and from the new geophysics we're going to be flying, from the LiDAR we're going to be flying, we will then select what our top targets are. And from there, based on what the data is telling us, determine how many drill holes we'll drill. Typically, to answer the question as best I can, you'd probably drill anywhere from 3 to 5 test holes, probably down to 100 to 150 meters depth initially, depending on what the geophysics is telling us. Although we do note that the majority of the mineralization we're finding is starting at, or if not at, surface. So bodes well for regional discovery.
What is the biggest cost item at the camp? What is the plan to optimize the exploration budget?
Excellent question. Overall, our drilling direct costs are about $250 a meter. That is quite low considering where we are. However, as I spoke of right at the start, we've injected a lot of knowledge and experience to capture low unit costs and maintain that as we increase scale. In other words, capture that economy of scale. So that comes from a lot of discipline in terms of organizing and growing and developing the camp. Highest cost item is probably, aside from just labor, is probably fuel, which you would expect. But again, our fuel management, our strategy around that has been boding very well for us, and will continue to, in terms of growing, the scale of things at camp. So yeah, we've got a good handle on cost and what are the biggest cost items, and we focus on making sure those are at an optimal.
Okay. How beneficial downhole would geophysical be?
Could you repeat that, please?
How beneficial would downhole geophysical be?
At this stage, not too much yet. As I said, we're focusing more on, I'll call it macro geophysics. The IP geophysics that I spoke of earlier, it's deep ground penetrating. We're doing that in 3D. That's going to give us ground penetration down to 500 meters, consistent across a 3.5 by 2 kilometer box, if you will. So clearly, with that much data, that much precision, and overlaying the drilling and data that we have from the historical resource, that's going to be more than enough to supply where we are. As we move forward, we will be increasing the resolution, if you will, or sharpening that resolution in terms of geophysics and data as we move forward. Right now, it's about getting the most value from every dollar that we put into the ground, and that is why we're proceeding this way.
What is the evidence that the diabase dike is a post-mineralization feature?
Well, mostly because it is, as it is a dike. It is non-mineralized in terms of gold, and I'm not a geologist, but I can say that when you look at the structure and what's occurred there, it is a post-mineralization sort of intrusive slicing event that combined with some very small localized offsetting that we're picking up on the western side of that diabase dike, noticing that there's been some slippage. We're talking literally just tens of feet slippage east-west, but also localized north-south. That is indicative of that sort of intrusive feature. Beyond that, there's probably a ton of other reasons I can give you if I knew them. But it is indeed post-mineralization, and it's typical what you see, at least from my experience with mesothermal deposits globally, particularly in Canada, and working at the Hemlo deposit myself for nearly 8 years. That was a significant and normal feature of the Hemlo deposit as well. It was almost identical diabase existence, intrusive.
Okay. I'm going to pass this over to Adam Graff, our senior analyst, and Artie. Go ahead, Adam.
Hey, Rob. Sorry I missed the beginning, but I wanted to just ask and get some general feel for, the true width that you guys have been estimating, and how consistent the width is, and sort of if you're thinking about this on a, like a 3 meter minimum mechanized mining width, what kind of average grades over that kind of width, if you're diluting?
Good question. It's Adam, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Adam. It's early days, obviously, but with the historic data we have, the mineralized mapping you see in terms of 3D, the thickness, it pinches and swells as you move along strike east-west. As I said, down to a minimum about 2 meters, but out as far as 20 meters plus. It's averaging low teens in terms of meters thickness. So if you're talking minimum mining width, which is in Canada typically about 3 meters for mechanized, we've got multiples of that we're dealing with. This isn't narrow vein, or let me remove the word vein because I've already qualified it's not a vein structure, it's a flood zone. We're just not, we don't have a situation where we're talking about narrow mineralized zones. These, when I say not narrow, it means in excess or multiples of the minimum mining width, about 3 meters. or 9 feet, I guess that is in standard units. So yeah, we're about 12 meters on average. The grades are coming in across those sort of intervals as well. You've seen a number of data sets there, anywhere between 5 and 14 meters in terms of intercept thickness is what we're averaging.
And sorry, the grades over those average widths.
Grades over those average widths are higher than the historic resource grade I mentioned at 6.8. So we're seeing higher rather than lower grades consistently. I'm not going to say it's any one grade or averaging because there's a lot of grades coming in a lot higher. There's some grades that come in a bit lower, but over much wider zones. So together, yeah, we seem to be averaging with the data we're collecting, with what we're noticing from the historic, that it's as we move the historic data, by the way, into 43-101 compliance, which is what we're doing in parallel with all this. A thicker, higher grade nature to this.
Rob, in your mind, what kind of a cutoff grade are you thinking about? A 2 gram or a 3 gram?
You know, throw my engineering hat back on. Given that this is straight at surface, ground conditions are optimal. Yes, it's hard rock, so every meter you go in depth has a cost associated, but at the same time, this has potential for near surface high grade open pit, for example. You put all that together, you know, in a totality of a project, it would drive the cutoff grade lower. But if you're conservative, I would be looking at somewhere between, you know, 3 grams per ton, perhaps, maybe even lower. It's just too early to say, but conservatively, I would say 3 or lower.
Maybe 2 for an open pit, and you know, 3.5 as you get to depth there underground.
It would probably be a lot lower than that. You know, given the amount of data that's there, the thickness of the zones and so forth. But as you move to depth, yeah, depending on what happens, you want to stay conservative and say, you know, 3 or less.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
again,
given the rock hardness, you know, what would be your, you know, initial thought on a processing flow sheet?
Another good question. It's one of the reasons why I brought in a world-class metallurgist on our advisory board, Ricardo Walahorsky. He's not only a world-class mine builder, but a metallurgist as well. We intend to start that towards the end of the year. The reason being is we're still gathering, combing, cleaning, and converting the historical data into modern 43-101 compliance. But also we're drilling, and with an upscale drilling targeted as a goal for starting again around mid this summer to late this summer. But towards the end of the year, we would anticipate and have as a goal another 10,000 meters of data in our hands. That is the point where we would feel comfortable beginning to evaluate this, you know, from a more macro perspective and start to draw more macro conclusions. Right now, we're not prepared to do that. However, historically, the met work that was done lent to the conclusions that they were mobbing in mill equipment, you know, at the time they ran out of monies, and that mill equipment was leach based. So basically, the test results they had done historically were very indicated that, you know, it's amenable to whole ore leach, you know, situation. In other words, high 80s, high 90s, or sorry, high 80s, low to mid 90 recoveries. Projecting that looking forward, I'd probably be somewhere in between, knowing that there's a sulfide component to it, but not having enough data yet to know how that's actually disseminated in terms of what type of mineral package is where in the deposit. As we probably all know, you can have multiple distributions of that. So getting more drilling, more data will help us understand the metallurgical distribution that we can draw inferences from. But I would guess that it would probably be some sort of float and leach of the tails, something like that. If that's a big if the it continues to have that sort of sulfide association that's high enough and amenable to that sort of thing. Otherwise, it'd probably be a whole ore leach, cyanide leach.
Maybe throw in is there free gold? Maybe throw in gravity concentrate.
Sorry, yeah, you're right. I neglected to say that the historic data is indicated that between 20 and 30% recovery was amenable to gravity separation. So you're talking, Nelson concentrator, right up front. However, we also know this is not a nuggety deposit. You may be wondering that. It's not. It is, I showed you in the geology, disseminated, evenly grading kind of thing. Whilst you will find on occasion some visual gold or whatever, it's nothing like you'd see in deposits like Red Lake or Pretium's deposit out there, Brucejack, I think it's called. You don't have that here. This is disseminated, finely disseminated with some VG, so it's pretty much ideal.
What other deposits do you think are the closest fit to this one? Known deposits.
Closest fit, I have to say, and this is from my years of working there and intimacy with understanding it and knowing it, is the Hemlo deposit. I'm not saying it is the Hemlo deposit. I'm just saying that mineralogically, geologically, structurally, this thing is darn near identical. It's not, the Hemlo had, widths up to 40 meters plus, of course, and I'm not saying that's the case here, but it's steeply dipping, it's lenticular, very undeformated, very even distribution of grade, as you saw, and you have multiples of those zones, parallel stacked, if you will. And so far, from the data we have, knowing it's a mesothermal deposit like Hemlo, we expect this to run, significant to depth as well as on strike. So it's probably the closest one I can point to, because Hemlo was quite undeformated as well. Whereas many of the other mesothermal deposits in Timmins, Kirkland Lake, even Red Lake, there's far more deformation and metamorphism that occurred there with those deposits. Apologize, little dogs.
Great. At this point, let me hand it off to Artie. I'm sure he's got some questions.
Sure.
Thank you. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
So, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned the underground infrastructure right now is not accessible, but you mentioned the raise that you sampled some high-grade values. Who did that sampling, and that area is still accessible?
No, I appreciate the question. To clarify, those were historic sample sets that were taken before those workings were released and allowed to be flooded, and that was late 40s, early 50s that sampling was done. So yeah, it's historic, but the data set is quite robust. We were pleased to see, and very well done, inclusive of underground structural mapping that also supports and lines up well with the drill results we have. So yeah, historic data sets.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And when we look at the current target areas that you are drilling and the old producing part, I'm
never did produce. This was never a producing mine, just to be clear. They were moving into production by moving mill equipment by the time they ran out of money. So it was never a producing mine. It was about as close as you could come to being a producing mine.
I see, but they were into the mineralization.
Yes,
they were in the yeah, okay.
Development, yes. Yeah.
I see. And you think you are trying to find like parallel structures to those? I'm trying to understand how important in the future it will be for you to get into those old developments.
It's a good question. I'm going to go back on the screen here to the 3D. You see here, because I've shown you that there is an indication that there's more parallel structures to the north, possibly. you know, we're going to be drilling there in our next drilling campaign on this eastern side, but as well to depth. So to answer your question, you know, we're focused on expanding this in all directions. It's open in all directions, as you can see. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you.
But sorry, Ari, maybe I wasn't entirely clear. The timing of getting back into these workings and utilizing them to further enhance the data knowledge and at some point start drilling from underground to much deeper depths. Wouldn't see that happening, Ari, at least, you know, until this is mostly drilled out, say about 2 years from now, when you'd start to look at early engineering studies like a PEA or something like that. The reason for that is because the mineralization is right to surface. So from surface, we can do a lot of work to grow this from surface. So there's no real need yet to get underground. But when the need comes, the time comes, it's fairly academic to dewater and recondition these workings given the rock quality and commence. Yeah.
Understood. It makes sense. And changing the topic, when we looking at your regional exploration efforts, how much, what portion of the total area were you able to cover with preliminary geophysics?
The image you see on the screen here is about 35 to 40% of our current land package. They flew the entire land package that we had up until November in 2018. So what we're going to be doing is flying 100% of our land package within the coming weeks with geophysics, Ari. So essentially 100% will have flown within a month's time, as well as LiDAR on 100% of our land as well.
And my last question, when we look at your exploration dollars, what portion of it goes to drill targets? Do you have any estimation?
Yeah, good question. Highest level, I referred to it sort of an 80-20 split. 80% of our focus is on the known in the Lingman Lake discovery, adding a second drill, going to be expanding our drilling results there in this purple box you see on the screen. The other remaining 20% effort and budget will be distributed amongst, you know, expanding our knowledge, developing high potential drill targets, and then eventually drilling out there. And that drilling is only 2-3 holes at a time. That will probably start probably by early next year, once we have all the geophysics, all the surface geology mapping done, and have those targets ready to go, permitted, ready for us to drill as well. Yeah, it's probably getting only about 20% of our funding distributed amongst that, and we'll continue that way.
Thanks for the answers, Robert.
You're welcome.
Campbell?
Yeah. Just one last question. How are the First Nations being engaged, and you know, just extending that the general ESG components? Anything you want to talk about? I know it's still early, but setting the stage.
It's a good question, Campbell. Thank you for the question.
So, and then we'll close.
Okay. First Nations communities have been and remain very supportive of what we're doing. We have strong relationships with our nearest neighbors, Red Sucker Lake and Sachiko Lake First Nations. Right from the get-go, of course, with my appointment, we established a good open dialogue, provided them with an update in terms of what we're doing, you know, a map of our drilling, some pictures, things like that. And then we followed it up with some Zoom discussions to make sure that everyone understands what we're doing and that we're hearing the concerns and interests of our neighbors as well. And, you know we're custodians of this land, and we're making every effort to not only say we're going to be, but do that as well, from an environmental perspective and otherwise. And that is reflective then of what we'll be embarking on likely throughout the balance of this year, which is more formalized engagement with our First Nations neighbors as well. Continue to progress that in a responsible way. We are working with and have secured a consultant to aid with that. I am certainly very much looking forward to progressing our relationships and the engagement.
Excellent. Thank you. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Please share your feedback on your way out, and you can catch a replay of this in about an hour at amvestcapital.com/replays. Imagine that. And with that, Robert, why don't you close us? Anything you want to say? Why should we buy? I'm going to ask, why should we buy your stock now? Got a lot of competition this summer, so why throw some chips on this one?
I spoke of rarity, and I'll leave you with this.
Yeah.
Rarity is everything in terms of quality of the resource. This has a DNA, if you will, that I refer to that is second to none. High grade, near surface, undeformated, so easy to drill out and map. It's in elephant country. We are in Ontario, Canada, one of the most favorable mining jurisdictions on the planet. So essentially, it's a high-grade asset in a Tier 1 gold jurisdiction, right? We have a massive land package, as you see here, with incredible high district-level potential for further discovery. That is rare in itself. And to have it so big, as I said, to be able to put Kirkland Lake between 3 and 6 targets here on the screen, it tells you about scale. And of course, we're entering now into the growth phase. We are active and growing and adding ounces and bringing tangible value to shareholders. So you combine those 3 points, I think it's a differentiating in terms of growth potential, value proposition for shareholders, but also for Signature and Self in terms of being identified as a world-class asset and package and team.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.